Season 15 did not receive any legend changes, but the meta has still shifted due to the changes to weapons and the loot pool. As such, I'll break down what the best and worst legends are in the Season 15 legend tier list. Let's dive into it. We're starting off this video strong in the F tier with a legend that I will continue dragging, and I still am not going to apologize to its fans: Mirage. His passive is incredibly one-dimensional and easy to outplay if you're half decent at the game, since there's a sound when he revives and it's pretty easy to guess where Mirage is reviving if you have been paying attention. His tactical could be used to fool the enemy, but most players have learned how to deal with it by now, and finally his ultimate has some juke and outplay potential, but Mirage is overall just a duelist and falls short the second he's fighting more than one enemy with his abilities on cooldown, and he provides near zero team play utility. He's also lost the little value that he did have on this new map, where there is very little room for decoy outplays and even less room for legends without proper vertical movement or range. Moving on with D tier is another legend that's a little bit better than Mirage, especially on this new map, which does enable his kit, and that's Revenant. His passive abilities are pretty useless because you're still a big, easy to hit, chunky robot, and climbing faster or sneaking around won't change that. As for his tactical, the silence is decent, but overall doesn't do much proactively, and instead is a reactive ability that at best stops a character in their tracks for a few moments. The ultimate itself has been kind of useless ever since its nerf with the loud sound effect and visual effect warning everyone that it is deployed, and Revenant relies on other movement legends to get its desired effect. He's overall a chore to have on your team and needs to be synergized with other legends just to be of any value. But again, he gets a few brownie points as he can climb to a lot of places on Broken Moon, and the zip rails allow you to make some fun plays with the Death Totem. Just not good enough to put him past D tier. Next on the list is of course Octane. Revenant and Octane go together like peanut butter and jelly, all the way down in the D tier. Octane is pretty good in general with explosive gameplay, a fairly useful passive and tactical, and a pretty damn good ultimate with his jump pad, but the reason Octane is D tier is because while he has good team utility with his ultimate, the jump pad sends you in a very predictable direction that's very easy to beam, and as of a few patches ago, you can't even accurately shoot back on it either, making you an easy target for whoever you're jump padding to, or even away from. He has a very little mid to end game potential as well, and all of these things combined just means that he fails to make a case to place any higher than the D tier. He too gets a few brownie points just for the verticality from his kit, but despite that, he's not really that good. Broken Moon is just too open, and taking a jump pad is still a death sentence. Moving on with the last legend of the D tier, we have Lifeline, who's supposedly getting changes in the near future with the blue supply bin secret loot compartments now being openable by all support legends. But we're just going to have to wait and see if she has any buffs to go with that nerf. In the meantime, Lifeline is another legend that kind of was in a bad spot or stuck in power creep limbo, and even more so with the rise of Newcastle. Lifeline's kit is outdated, as I've covered in previous videos, despite Respawn's best efforts. The real power lies in her passive that allows Lifeline to revive both of her teammates at once while not needing to be stuck in an animation, and instead be ready to deal with the incoming teams, heal up herself, loot, or whatever she feels like. The thing is, while this is a pretty strong passive and it is pretty hard to counter, it's incredibly niche, and you really only get value from it when your teammates are already down. This wouldn't be a problem if her passive or ultimate had any real use, but the tactical is a small drone that floats around and slowly heals health, and her ultimate just gives you better loot at a hefty 3.5 minute cooldown. There was a minor tweak in recent patches, but nothing that makes her more valuable, and again, she's losing out hard on power creep, and as such sits in the D tier. Starting off the C tier, we have Pathfinder, and contrary to popular belief, he has a passive. Albeit it's pretty useless, where scanning a beacon will refund your zipline and give you a cooldown reduction of 10 seconds per beacon up to 4 times. His grapple is the most significant part of his kit. His ultimate isn't the most useful, but it does have some uses in rotating fast, taking high ground in the mid to late game, or jumping around to stay alive for a little bit longer. He has a big hitbox and needs to be careful about taking 1v1s, so you should always try to stay on flanks or on high grounds, which Broken Moon does have a lot of. Pathfinder is a recon legend and scan beacons to get the next ring, but that's kind of already covered with Seer in the meta. Next up is Wraith, who just hasn't been able to catch a break for the last few seasons. Don't get me wrong, she is still pretty strong, especially in some bunker metas, but she isn't the core of any roster anymore, and is pretty much useless on large open maps such as Stormpoint and in many cases Broken Moon, since her portal is just not long enough to reach between cover, and she is exposed to the entire server whenever she tries to make a portal play. Wraith's passive, Hindsight of the Void, is supposed to warn you if somebody aims at you or if there are enemies or traps nearby, but it seems to only go off after it's way too late. Her tactical is pretty good, but much like Vantage, feels a bit clunky as you need to wait for an over a second long animation before finally entering the void and being able to either push forward or retreat to your team teammates. Wraith's job is to either flank or to be a portal slave for her team, but again, she can't do her job on Stormpoint or Broken Moon because of the open spaces and all of the verticality on that map, which holds her back in the C tier. However, she does have her moments on maps like World's Edge, which is why she still stays this high up on the list. And of course, there is Loba. Her passive eye for quality allows her to see epic and legendary loot for walls up to 112.5 meters away, giving her an edge when contesting other teams and generally rotating around with or without intentionally looting around. But on large spread out maps like Broken Moon, 112 meters is just too short to get any meaningful loot on the majority of the POIs. Her tactical allows her to teleport to hard to reach places or escape trouble, and these abilities are cool and all, but the main reason she's even slightly relevant is her ultimate. The Black Market Boutique is a portable, placeable device that allows you to teleport nearby loot to your own inventory. This too has a range of 112 meters, and again, Broken Map is very spread out, so it's hard to get a lot of loot. Loba is a core legend in a sustained composition, and is a great counter to bunker meta, and she can use the Black Market Boutique to keep her team and herself sustained while at the same time stealing loot from surrounding teams and continuing to poke. This makes even more sense since we might be heading into a sniper meta. Another legend that suffers from the large, barren, and empty surfaces is of course Bloodhound, who at this point is just a worse Seer, but they can run faster. Their passive allows you to see the enemy's footsteps to see if somebody recently was in the area. The tactical is the main part of the kit, allowing Bloodhound to scan and reveal enemies, and the ultimate allows Bloodhound to run faster and see enemies through smokes and other abstractions. We are in a scan meta, and Bloodhound is easier to use, but they're significantly weaker than Seer, who also has a scan passive, but can see enemies through walls at any given time, including ones that are just sitting around. It's effectively a legal wall hack. In addition to his tactical, that lasts for 8 seconds instead of Bloodhound's free, and not only does it reveal the enemy, but it shows their health bars above their head, cancels any channeled action, revives, and on top of that, silences them for 1.25 seconds after they're hit. One legend that does benefit from the larger maps, but suffers from the lack of verticality that the map offers is Mad Maggie. Maggie's passive temporarily highlights enemies you've been damaged, giving you a wall hack and a clearer sight picture when you're fighting someone for a second, and even works through Catalyst's Dark Veil. Her tactical right drill can damage enemies on the other side of a wall, but ultimately she doesn't have a place in the meta. If anything, she might see a resurgence as an anti-meta legend if the camping gets too out of hand this season. And to round off the C tier, we have the season's new legend, Catalyst. The teasers kind of hinted that she would be this huge anti-scan legend to end the terror of scan legends, but it seems like she doesn't have too much of an impact. Her passive is, in my humble opinion, the strongest part of the kit and allows her to reinforce doors, making them take twice as many punches to break, and it stops enemies from being able to interact with them. She can also rebuild doors, though these only blocks a doorway and can't actually be opened. The reinforced door is pretty cool, but it's ultimately reliant on there being doors to play around, and while Broken Moon has a lot of doors, Respawn for some reason insisted on adding 3 to 4 doorways into every room, making her reinforced kind of useless since it only works on 2 doorways at one time. She might be more useful on other maps, but they have way fewer doors to work with. Her tactical places a patch of ferrofluid which makes a loud sound if an enemy gets too close, and if an enemy steps on it, will take damage and get slowed. This ferrofluid doesn't go away unless destroyed, picked up, or replaced, so it's pretty solid for holding down ground, especially in tandem with the rest of her abilities. Finally, her ultimate Dark Veil launches a 55 meter long and about 3 meters high wall that blocks vision and most scan abilities, but not all of them. Here's a quick graph showing what it does and doesn't block. These abilities are pretty good on paper, but the wall only lasts for about 30 seconds, so it doesn't have that much use in setting up and is very easy to counter. I can see Catalyst being decent in a fully defensive composition, playing for endgame, but it'll probably be very hard to get there to begin with, and her being a very niche pick is why she sits in the C tier. We're starting off the B tier with Ashe. She doesn't see much use on maps such as World's Edge, but can be the perfect rotation legend for Broken Moon. Her passive is also useful to find enemies with whom she can fight or set up ambushes, as it marks death boxes on the map to show where enemies have been fighting within the last 3 minutes. Her tactical isn't as good, but gives a little poke without wasting resources, as well as having some niche uses, as it can snare an enemy and stop them from running away for about 3 seconds. The ultimate phase tear can go up to 62.5 meters away in any direction, including vertically, and gives her the explosiveness for herself and her own team that Octane and Pathfinder could only dream of. And the only real counter to the portal is if you place the portal poorly in view of the enemy team, otherwise you'll appear next to your enemies almost instantaneously. She's again very valuable on Broken Moon and has seen some play on other maps, but doesn't shine as well on World's Edge as Wraith does. If we're heading into an open space aggressive meta, we might see more Ashe being picked for her all-in capability, but time will tell. Caustic is a great defensive bunker legend because his barrels and his gas stays up for a lot longer than Wattson's fences, and can also block walls while tanking Crypto's EMP, AMP. His passive goes with his gas kit and makes Caustic immune to the effects of any Nox gas, and enemies inside of the gas from your own gas traps will be highlighted. The passive makes Caustic incredibly useful if he's the only Caustic, and a must pick if many other teams are running him, especially in the final 2 rings. His tactical and ultimate act as great cover to block the vision of enemies, and even allows you to make a full reset if things take a turn for the worse. There's literally no legend that can stay alive for as long as Caustic, making him the best bunker legend in the game. The reason he's not in a higher tier is because he's not nearly as strong in open areas, and there's a finite amount of houses and positions that he can play, especially on Broken Moon, as the houses that he can play in don't seem to be designed with his barrels in mind. A counter, or if you may, somewhat of an answer to the passive and defensive meta, may very much be Crypto. Last season I ranked him way too high because I just believed that much in him, but the meta didn't take a turn for a slow passive meta and instead turned into an aggressive slugfest, which ended up pushing Crypto aside, because Crypto flourishes in slower passive bunker metas and might be very valuable this season. At the end of the day, it comes down to what legends are popular and how the lobbies will play out. A good Crypto push is hard to counter, with Crypto setting up the drone to then detonate the EMP right before he and his teammates push in, but it really only works against teams that are playing passive or bunkering up. He is a recon character and can too scan beacons, but Crypto can also send his drone to scan out the beacon in his stead, which will instantly scan the beacon without risking Crypto dying on top of the beacon mid-animation, and it works the same way for respawns. Just like Maggie, Crypto breaks Gibraltar's bubble, but it doesn't have too much of a use against Newcastle and teams who play in the open, so again, he is very meta dependent. Valkyrie is one of those legends I'd never think would hit the B tier, and despite the inputs for my peers, I'm going to keep her here. Her rotations are kind of outshined by zip rails, and the large vast openness of Broken Moon makes going for a Valkyrie ult not only risky, but hard to get value out of, as you can't clear that much of a stretch and land safely at the same time. The design of Broken Moon has left a lot more to be desired from her kit, with her strongest redeeming factor being her passive allowing her to take high ground, but I just don't think that's enough to justify her in a higher tier than the B tier. And the next level to finish off the B tier will be Vantage, who I certainly did not place too low last season, despite all of your comments telling me I was wrong. Really, how did that go? I hold a grudge. That's who I am. People realized she was bad, especially after they fixed her movement exploits, which helped have her pick rate drop like a rock. Anyways, her passive is pretty interesting, as aiming at an enemy will give you information on them and their team, including how many are alive and what armors they use. She also has a bullet drop indicator for long range weapons. Her tactical is perfect to maneuver the verticality of Broken Moon, and finally there's her passive, which is a third weapon, a sniper rifle, that deals a lot of damage on the second shot and a damage buff against a hit enemy. This is especially useful if you take a high ground on Broken Moon and allows you to make some pretty solid sniping plays no matter your loadout. However, her hitbox is almost as big as Caustic's, meaning that you will struggle in fights, and that makes the good mobility sort of wasted. She's also very clunky to play with half of a second delay to move her companion around and almost 2 seconds just to start a leap. The sniper is pretty decent actually, especially if not respected, but leaves a very visible laser trail that gives away your position. All in all, she's a cool legend, but doesn't really provide anything useful to her team other than her passive, and you really only need to know a full team's shields and how many are alive in very niche situations. Vantage is a recon legend and scan beacons to get to the next ring, but again, that's already covered with Seer in the meta. I believed in Newcastle last season, and in my defense, some teams started picking him up, but I may have been too optimistic. That being said, I'll keep him high up in the tier list and place him in the A tier, thanks to the Broken Moon layout allowing him to instantly take large high grounds with his ultimate, as well as creating space in the most exposed open end games. His passive allows Newcastle to revive a teammate while being shielded and able to move, keeping Newcastle and the teammates safe and making Lifeline all sorts of jealous. This can be combined with his tactical, which is a movable energy barrier that can be directed wherever you point it, and yes, you can direct it while you are reviving for extra cover. Finally, his ultimate allows Newcastle to create a defensive castle wall almost anywhere, providing cover in almost any situation. Newcastle's ultimate allows him to make a massive vertical leap to instantly take high grounds or leap to his teammates up to 75 meters away, making him one of the perfect supports for the meta, with his largest contributor to this tier being the permanent cover as well as the strength of the revive. The other side of the same coin has to be Gibraltar, who also kind of serves the space creating tanky supportive role, but in a more of an aggressive attack sort of sense. He did fall out of relevance after an 8 or so season reign and was a must pick thanks to his strong duelist kit due to Fortify coupled with his gun shield, along with his bubble providing infinitely valuable cover and his ultimate being a good way to clear out open areas and providing space. Overall, he's been a strong duelist and one of the best legends to create and manipulate space, so why is he A tier? Gibraltar was already struggling in the later part of season 13 with the rise of Mad Maggie and lost almost all relevance throughout season 14 due to Seer continuing to dominate the meta. Seer's tactical turned everyone in the bubble into easy targets and cancel Gibraltar's revives. I can see players running Gibraltar in all facets of play, but for the moment I'll be putting him in the bottom of the A tier. Also, as I'm writing this, I'm realizing that most of the A tier consists of legends that create or manipulate space, which is something you really need in Apex, especially if you play on larger open maps, because there generally is very little space to play in the first place. With the next one on the list being Bangalore. Bangalore has a great passive that makes her a strong duelist, giving her a movement speed buff whenever she takes fire. Her tactical, the smoke canister, allows her to smoke off entire teams to rotate forward, create temporary smoke walls in open areas, or smoke right on top of herself or an enemy to then scan with another legend or using digital threats to kill them when they are blinded. It's especially good on large open maps such as Broken Moon, since she can create smoke walls in the open or just blocking off entrenched teams, and as such create an insane amount of space for her team. Her ultimate barrage is pretty good at this as well, providing even more space. You can hold off an entire team for pushing for a good 20 seconds, or even throw it towards the team you want to push in, then run after the explosions and just end up taking the position that you want. She's great at manipulating space and has a good duel ability, but still falls short because at the end of the day, Seer is meta, Bloodhound is sorta meta, and Valkyrie exists. All of these wall hacks make Bangalore's main ability pretty useless and sadly keeps her down in the A tier. It doesn't help that you don't know whether your enemies will be able to see you through the smokes or not, since there's no way of knowing whether someone has something like a digital threat before the fact. Another legend that's been seeing a lot of resurgence and can not only create space but infinitely improve on it as well as punishing those without proper space is Rampart. Her tactical modded loader increases magazine size by 15% and decreases reload time by 25% whenever she uses LMGs such as the Spitfire, the Rampage, L-Star, or her minigun. And her tactical amped cover allows you to place up to 5 one-way barriers at a time that blocks incoming shots and boosts outgoing damage by 20%. Her ultimate goes hand in hand with bunkering and can either act as a secondary handled weapon, much like Vantage's ultimate, or be placed as a minigun that anybody can use. The minigun itself doesn't serve much of a purpose when placed, as it needs to be revved up and turns you into an easy kill, but it is pretty strong when taking fights in its mobile mode. Rampart is pretty strong as a base legend, but her abilities scale exponentially when coupled with at least one more bunker legend such as Newcastle, Wattson, or Caustic. It's also funny because while she synergizes with a Newcastle, Rampart's ultimate is also a great way to counter enemy Newcastles as well, as it can easily destroy the entire shield in one magazine without wasting any actual ammunition resource. She has also seen a lot of value combined with Horizon, as she can jump Horizon's tactical and beam anyone who dares to stand in her way. And another legend that punishes the lack of cover and to a certain degree teams that aren't bunkering up properly with an insane amount of pressure is Fuse. And hear me out here, Fuse hasn't really found a spot in the meta ever since he was released because he just didn't have any use. His tactical knuckle cluster is a perfect tool to deny legends angles and space for 6 seconds per cluster and serves as a good counter for legends that might enter the meta such as Newcastle, who has plenty of angles that his wall can be naded from for very good value, and his ultimate, the Motherload, is very useful against teams who might be playing in the open, as they get locked within the Motherload and become easy targets for Fuse and his team. At the moment, the Motherload also reveals anyone on the other side of Catalyst's ultimate. Couple this with knuckle clusters and grenade spam and it's an easy cleanup. He can be combined with Horizon's ultimate for a devastating wombo combo, but he doesn't need her to be viable. And let's round off the A tier with another legend that's great for creating space, a little bit more versatile than Caustic, and that benefits from the building layouts on Broken Moon more so than any other defensive legends, that being Wattson. Wattson already was outclassed by Caustic as he simply provided better defensive abilities, but she outshines him in any situation that doesn't involve sitting in a building for a long period of time, or playing for the final ring. Her tactical allows her to set up more effectively on Broken Moon considering the size of buildings, so I can see a lot of value from Wattson on this map, especially combined with the A tier legends and above, so keep an eye out for her in the legend select. As for the S tier, this time we only have 2 legends. I'll start with the less useful one and move on to the almost must pick this season, with the first S tier legend being Seer, which is really what the S tier always has been standing for. Keep in mind they're probably all going to be Seer nerfed soon enough, but Respawn has to release their heirloom before they can nerf him to the ground, so it doesn't affect sales. Anyways, moving on. Seer was the most overpowered legend in Season 13 and in Season 14, making a resurgence into the meta after some ranked grinders and later on professional teams realized just how strong he was. And in this, he went from being one of the least pick legends to one of the top pick legends in top tier lobbies. His passive allows him to have a permanent, legal wall hack. His tactical is a much improved version of Bloodhound's tactical, and his ultimate gives his entire team information on anyone who might be moving around within the ultimate's dome for a serious amount of time. If you combine Seer with the next legend in this list, the enemy team will have a hard time dealing with it. And that legend is Horizon. We all know how she works, with the passive giving you a glide and removing fault stun, her tactical giving you a gravity lift to her and her team, as well as the ultimate black hole, sucking enemies in and trapping them to be easy targets, and even highlighting them to make them easy to shoot, grenade, and become easy kills. She was supposed to be pretty weak in Season 14, but teams saw success with coordinated Horizon tactical into ultimate pushes, and as such, she managed to see a lot of play, despite getting a pretty hefty nerf in that season. Not only that, but the Broken Moon map's layout makes her vertical mobility for herself and her team invaluable, allowing you to quickly rotate vertically and take the high ground wherever you are. As I said previously, coupling this with a Seer allows you to play aggressively and make plays you've never dreamed of before. And that's my legend tier list for the season. If you disagree with any, let me know in the comments. As usual, this tier list is a prediction, but I'm hoping to be a lot more accurate compared to Season 14, which was a little bit off. Anyways, if you guys want some tips for Season 15, check out the video on the screen. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all tomorrow.